Welcome back to the Cream City Club podcast. I am Spencer Michaelis, and I'm here again with Gunnar Amelung. Gunnar, how are you doing after that beat down the Bucks just put on the Celtics?
Yeah, we needed that desperately because I was scared of how we're gonna maybe take this podcast if we didn't get that exact result, and we did. So, should be a little bit more positive today, but in general, I'm doing good. So, how are you doing, Spencer?
I'm doing pretty well now for sure after that game, and I'm not super excited for the snow that's probably going to be on the ground when we release this podcast. But
Yeah.
uh, yeah, no, I'm doing all right, doing all right.
If I
It's
die
almost
tomorrow, it's nice that I went out with a Celtics beatdown. That's my last day on Earth today.
correct. That's a great way to put it. Um, if you're listening and you haven't yet subscribed, please take a moment to do that on whatever platform you're listening on. And if you believe we earned it, rate us 5 stars. Follow us on Twitter at the Cream City Pod to stay up to date on these episode releases. And as you may have guessed, today's episode will be focused on the Bucks and really just the last two games, the Utah game and then the Celtics game that we mentioned. So, Gunnar, just to kind of wrap up. The Bucks just wrapped up a couple games this week before Golden State will be coming to town on Saturday, and I believe that'll be the second night of a back-to-back for them. So very winnable
Mhm.
game for the Bucks. Um, Unfortunately, even with extremely clean jerseys I mean, the equipment manager did a fantastic. He did his job during the Utah game.
Yeah, he showed up.
He was there. No one else did. No one else showed up, at least at the beginning. So the Bucks were unable to avoid uh, another embarrassing loss, really, in a string of what have been a few over the last couple weeks to the Utah Jazz, obviously losing 132 to 116. That score is a lot closer than that game was actually played for the most part. And then obviously tonight just beat the Celtics 135 to 102. But let's start with that Jazz game. So I guess initial thoughts kind of, especially let's talk about the beginning of that game and how it started and where everything was going wrong at first.
Yeah, pretty much everything all at once was happening, and they shot a storm on us. I think they almost broke the record in that first half for three-pointers. I'm pretty sure they were like one short or whatever it was. Just really defensive breakdowns all over the place, and we should probably obviously mention that Dame was out for personal reasons, so you're already kind of it shouldn't have been a defensive collapse, I guess, if Dame's out. So that's not really an excuse, but just the way that things were already trending at that point, you're scared coming into that, like, oh no, what's gonna happen now with Dame out? So yeah, we were down 33 points at halftime. As you mentioned, after Giannis had his quote and whatever, people pulled that one little line out about the equipment manager, but to respond in that fashion too is just we deserved every single part of everything that we got after that one. I I don't know. My brain hurts from that. I don't even know if I could break down what happened in the first half, but I kind of took a different approach because we're going to talk about trades at some point here. So I was kind of scouting guys that I maybe would like on their team. And they're starting to play better. So I don't know if they're trade candidates at this point, but I was watching guys like John Collins and Colin Sexton and Chris Dunn even on a smaller level, and I was just seeing if we could pick them up at some point, just to make myself feel better. But um, yeah, I guess you have any like main thoughts? I mean, we can talk a little bit about the second half of that one because I got a
Yeah,
specific player I want to call out in that point. But
yeah.
did you see anything in that first half to where we are behind so much?
Yeah, I mean, defensive rotations were just god awful in the first half. They were late to close out. They were then attacking those closeouts if they weren't shooting and making threes. They were not helping correctly. They were leaving guys uncovered under the basket. To have that, like you said, right after Giannis comes out and goes, we need to figure it out defensively, and the Bucks instead go out and put up one of the worst defensive halves I've seen the Bucks ever have. Uh, wasn't encouraging, wasn't a super fun evening up until halftime, at least. It still wasn't a fun evening after the second half, but you could at least take some positives away, which I think, like you said, we'll get into in a few minutes. But I will say, I know, I mean, campaign, whatever. It's not like he's a huge loss normally, but being without him and Dame and not really having any true point guard probably didn't help things either. Um, yeah, I mean, the first half it looked like a team who was just not happy to be there, not enthused, not energetic at all. I mean, as dumb as and as annoying as Jason Kidd's energy and effort was, as he'd say it every single game, there's an element of you have to have both of those things at least to a degree. And the Bucks had none of it in the first half. Like you said, I don't think there's too much to cover. It was just it was terrible. They got destroyed in the first half, but they did come out in the second half and they got it down to I want to say 8 in the third quarter. Is that right? I
At the
think because
very end
then
of it, for sure.
Bob,
Yeah, that last couple minutes. Yeah, that's what I want to talk about was that Bobby stretch at the end. But
yeah.
yeah.
But either way, they had a really, really good third to give themselves at least a fighter's chance going into the fourth. But yeah, what did you see during that third? Probably good and bad.
Yeah, Bobby was the one I wanted to point out first in a positive and a negative. Bobby, you got everything Bobby Portis there at the end. Um, to his credit, he did get us back in that sort of game, I guess you could say, quote unquote. I mean, like you said, the closest we got was 8, and then it was never really that close after that because of the rotation we had coming out of the fourth quarter. But he got off to a nice scoring thing there, and he kind of kept going back to his shot, and he was getting in fights with Olynyk back and forth, which that's kind of what we've been talking about. Is it started with a negative, like Bobby got smoked again, and then he was John, and then after that he actually was viewed positive and hitting a bunch of shots. And that's kind of the Bobby Portis experience. But the one I wanted to point out there was we did have an opportunity. I think it was 10 or 11 or something. I don't remember what it was at the end of that fourth. Oh no, it
It,
was 8. I think that's what it was.
yeah,
It was
it
8.
was 8. Yeah.
So there was like 12 seconds on the shot clock with like 10 seconds to go or reversed or something. Either way,
Yeah,
a shot goes up, the quarter's over.
yeah,
Um,
there was 2 more seconds on the shot or on the game clock than the shot clock. So there was going to be, you couldn't wait until the very last second. But
yeah.
yes, he could have shot at the end of the shot clock and the quarter would have been over.
Yeah, and I don't like you said, I mean you texted me this too. It's like I'm fine with you taking the shot because you did just prove that you can nail it and the matchup was I guess was favoring you at that point, but to just completely be boneheaded like that and just take it the second you get the ball is just absolutely ridiculous. And I mean, whatever, like I said, he got us back in the game, but that's the Bobby Portis where it's just like I can't take this guy anymore. And again, I was playing a big rant on Bobby, but then he had a great game tonight. So every single time I want to get off a rant or a take, I can't say it. But um, I'll kind of segue you into Chris Livingston here because I know you want to talk about him.
Yeah.
A guy we really haven't seen at all this year. In any decent stretch at the very least, we've probably seen him in a couple garbage time minutes, probably like 8 games or something, I think they said, but it was not actually like legit minutes, but um he showed a lot too. So I guess you can speak to that.
Yeah. Just quickly before I go into that, I do want to touch on Bobby. So I think he did help get them back into it a bit, but I think he was only like in that quarter, probably +4 or +6. It wasn't a huge, like he was part of that last lineup and they were doing a lot of good things. There was a lot of energy and like the young guys were out there, Livingston, who were, like you said, I'm going to talk about in a second, but him taking that shot, it goes from 8 and it should have been 8 at worst going into the fourth quarter. Should have been 8 at the very worst. And what does he do? But take the shot, miss it badly. They go down, they score running right past him because he didn't get back on defense, make it 10 to end the quarter, and then he gets a tech between quarters. So it's 11 when we start the fourth. It just felt like the game changed at that point. We'll talk a little bit about the lineup and stuff that started the fourth after. I'll talk about Livingston now, though, because like you said, we hadn't seen much. Frankly, I remember watching all the summer league games and stuff. His first game, I was like, ugh, I don't know what he does. Like he was rebounding pretty decently, I remember, and you could tell he was a pretty good athlete and pretty strong, but he just looked really hesitant and uncomfortable, and he did not look like even close to an NBA player. You could kind of see it throughout summer league, where a couple times I think I texted you, I was like, I'm kind of seeing what they see now. Like he's starting to show that he's got an okay handle for a guy his size. He can make an open shot if you leave him alone, and he finishes pretty well. He actually finishes through contact really well from what we've seen so far. During that run, he looked like the Bucks' best point of attack defender that they have on the team. And I don't know if he can sustain that for really long stretches. I mean, he played like 14 minutes of game time in a row in that game, and he was sustaining it for most of it. I really could not believe how well he was moving his feet. He, I feel bad almost saying this, but like I had this very like stereotypical view of him as a 5-star 1 year guy at Kentucky, that he was going to be like a low basketball IQ type of player. I think he's the complete opposite. I think he's got one of the higher, kind of along the lines of Ajax, where some of our younger guys seem to have some of our higher basketball IQs in general. He, especially on the defensive end, it might just be instincts, but he is in the right spot. He's moving his feet. He understands angles really well. He was cutting off ball handlers, forcing them back into tough spots. Like I, I was super impressed with what I saw, and I tweeted, I hope he gets more opportunities because of this. And we don't know if that's going to happen yet or not. I mean, he played in the Celtics game. It wasn't a ton, but he looked like the guy that I would try and get him at least, 5, 10 minutes where he's just annoying the other team and playing good defense. And I don't think he's going to be, he became a liability during the Jazz game on offense because him and Ajax were out there together and he was exhausted. So he wasn't really a threat and they didn't worry about either of them on the court, and that became a problem. And that's kind of when he had to come out of the game. But I think if he's the only guy who's not a huge offensive threat, that he's not going to be a liability on the court. Like I said, he finished pretty well through contact. He seems to understand the dunker spot really well. And I think if he's wide open, like I would be fine with him shooting a three from what I've seen of him. His free throws looked okay when he got a chance to go to the line. Like, I don't know. I was super excited about that because I was not expecting him to be able to help this year at all. And frankly, I didn't have super high hopes for him after the draft or after summer league. And right now, it's probably a small sample size, and I'm probably falling for some of this stuff. But just eye test alone, I really liked what I saw. I don't know if you noticed anything specific that I didn't point out or anything along those lines.
Well, he's got one of the weirder stories too. We should probably mention on draft night. I remember they had a tweet and it was like Chris Livingston is telling other teams not to draft him, and they
Yeah,
didn't say the Bucks yet right away. We're like, that's weird. It's the second round. Like, kind of a weird spot to kind of. I know guys do it. Like, there's an old like Austin Reeves story where he said that he kind of wanted to go to the Bucks or Lakers or whatever. So guys always like nitpick their teams back at the back end of the draft, but um, it was weird because it came so early. I'm pretty sure in that second round,
it's
and
like
then
the
he ends up
second
going
pick.
like, yeah, and it's like we get him with like the last pick or whatever pick we had. Um, but yeah, I think everything you said, and then probably even a little bit more. I mean, the confidence that he even had. I think it was like a not a coast to coast drive really, but he had a fast break and he didn't even pass it to Giannis. He just took it himself. I think he missed it too, but he had a couple of those where it's just like, oh, he was not shy at all.
Yeah,
Which is easy to do when you're getting like you're down 30 at one point in the game and it's just your chance to go. But it's also, I mean, scary. I guess at that point you're playing with Giannis and you're also making a run to get back in the game. So he could easily defer there. And he didn't do it. So yeah, like I said, everything you said, but it's just gonna be hard to probably get him minutes. It was already hard to get AJ and Marjan and Andre all minutes. Especially with Jay coming back even very, very soon now. So I hope he gets some run here and we can see more of him, but I just think it's going to be hard. But knowing that we got another guy who we at least like a little bit, and we're going to have a segment here. I won't touch on anything else outside of the young guys, but we can go back the past couple of years. We haven't had really, I mean, we had Marjan last year and a couple like flyer guys where we're like kind of excited about them, but to have like four guys that we actually somewhat like, um, and they're all young and whatever. I mean, with our draft assets right now, um, I just think it's nice to actually have some young guys in their back pocket versus you got no draft picks, you got no young guys that you like. And now we can kind of get a little bit creative with some trades too. But like I said, we'll touch on that later. But yeah, I mean, if there was one silver lining in this game, super nice silver lining because we literally got a new thing to talk about. And um, yeah, I mean, I like him. So hopefully we get to see him.
yeah. I guess my one, I tweeted about it too, so I'm going to talk about it. But my biggest complaint was the Bucks did this great job of making it a game going into the fourth, and they did it by having guys like Ajax and Livingston, and I mean even Bobby, but also obviously Giannis. It was a ton of athleticism on the court, and we come out in the fourth quarter, and the lineup that starts it is Chris Middleton, Livingston, Bobby, Brooke, and I can't remember who the fifth was, but it wasn't. No, it was Pat. It was Pat, who used to be athletic,
Yeah.
but he still is athletic, but he's not anywhere near the level he used to be, and he's not anywhere near the level of some of the younger guys. And they immediately went on their run, and it was so. I mean that lineup is way too slow. You you cannot have Chris Middleton, Pat, Brooke, and Bobby on the court at the same time. That team can't move their feet laterally at all. And it only took like a minute for them to put Giannis in for Bobby, but I think it went from 11 to 17 or 18 immediately to start that quarter.
Hmm.
And that was just one where it's like, I don't get the thought. How would that ever work? Like, no matter what, I don't see that working. And that's the type of stuff that we've talked about it a lot, but it's a first year coach. I can kind of see those types of mistakes happening. But even in the moment, it was like, why? And especially with Bobby, how he ended the third, you just need to get him out before he's going to separate subject. But I also tweeted about that. I was tweeting a lot during this game, I guess. Um, Separate subject, but to me, you get your good 5 minutes out of Bobby when you get him, which you don't always get him. But if you get him, you take him out. You don't push
Yep.
the time he's in because he's going to give it back. He will. He's going to start missing. When you get 5 good minutes from Bobby, it's because he made almost every shot while he was in the game. He's going to start missing those. He's going to get a dumb tech. He's going to not defend anybody because that's usually what happens. And I just think you have to be understanding of what he's capable of, and you can use it. And I think he could be more valuable if he was used like that, where you're just getting the most out of him, and then you're saying, all right, he's done. We'll try it again in 5 minutes. If it's going poorly, we'll take him back out. Like you can let it be more of a feel thing instead of, hey, he's going in and he's going to play the next 9 minutes of game time no matter what. That usually doesn't work. And I it was just so obvious to me, even before when I saw the lineup coming out to start the quarter, you could kind of tell they're about to put it out of reach. And that type of stuff is always more annoying when it's so obvious. And
Hmm.
those are the things I think Bucks fans have very reasonable complaints on when they say, why aren't we making these changes? When it's something that is just so glaringly obvious, like not pressuring the ball at half court, for example, which they have started. I will say, I noticed even starting in this Jazz game a little bit, Beasley has not been picking up nearly as far out the last couple of days or games. So maybe we're starting to finally see it. But yeah, I don't know. Before we move on to this Celtics game, you have any thoughts on the usage of Bobby and the way that lineup went out in the fourth?
Well, I was gonna stop on Bobby, but then now you just sparked another comment because you said something about on last episodes last week. You're saying there is some stat where every time he gets the ball in the post, he rarely passes out of it. And I really watched that the last couple games, and that is very much true. And they had a funny comment on the Celtics game, so I guess that'll kind of sort of drag us into that game. But they said that, and I don't know how old the interview was, but basically Bobby was saying how ever since playing with Giannis, he was always more of a post-up player before coming here, and he had to learn how to shoot more and like run around and play off ball. And you've gone completely away from that now. Like, yeah, that sounds great on paper. Like I said, I don't know how they said it as if it was like he just said this, but maybe he said this like in 2021 or something. But that is not the player that we're getting right now. It's like every time he gets the ball, he just thinks he can take a fadeaway mid-ranger or back the guy down and never pass out of it, and then just whatever it is, I got the ball now, so I'm gonna try to score. Um, and I don't know. I just again
Yeah.
then segueing into this Celtics game where he did all that and he did it well. So now you're starting to see like, and then I got my girlfriend and stuff who's a big Bobby's fan yelling in my face how he's see, I told you he's making all these shots. What are you gonna say now? And it's like, yeah, this happens like every like 10 or so games. He'll make like a lot of shots, just like they call it that Pistons game last month. I think it was actually very similar to this one, where he's just making everything in it. All of his post ups are working in everything. So, and they didn't have Al Horford in this game too. So, that was kind of a benefit somehow to Giannis. He guards Giannis well. He's 58 years old and he can still do it. Um, but they're a little bit smaller, I would say. Even once you take Porzingis out of it, that kind of makes it a little bit easier for our bigger guys. But um, Yeah, I guess we can segue into the Celtics game. Um, Completely opposite. We felt like the Jazz in this one, which
Yeah.
um yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want to take it away here first, but um we got off to a hot start. And here, I want to get off my Stephen A take here quick on Brian Anderson. Brian, you suck at your job. Uh no, I won't go that hard, but you're not as good as you were in Brewers games, but I'm just so tired of these national games, and I know the the Bucks are not in a good streak right now. I I'm documenting this podcast of complaining about the Bucks. Like I'm well aware of it. But when it's a national TV game and it's like two good teams on paper, we don't need to hear you ripping about the Bucks every millisecond of the game. And this is like when we're on like a good hot streak to start out this first quarter, and it's like every single comment is just about like how how bad we're doing and everything else. And I don't know. This is my weaker moment because I was very annoyed by it, and I was disappointed in Brian and Stan Van Gundy. Whatever. I don't. He is what he is. I've heard him all the time. He's one of those guys like Reggie Miller who just every time Giannis shoots, it's like it's a catastrophic bomb that goes off because he shot once, and I don't like Giannis shooting either. But you can calm down. Um, and maybe you want to get your Giannis free throw takes off right now, quick before,
Yeah.
while we're on the commentating.
Yeah. No, so I've been on record and I got yelled at by Brewer fans, but I do think that Brian Anderson has fallen off quite a bit as an announcer, and I do think he's better for national games than Brewer games, which we won't talk about that too much, but I it's like you said, the Bucks were literally up by 22 points in the first quarter, and they weren't mentioning one good thing. They kept saying, well, the Celtics keep missing these shots, and they weren't mentioning that, oh, all of a sudden the Bucks, I mean, the Celtics missed some open shots, don't get me wrong, but the Bucks were actually playing aggressive. They were playing hard. And the thing I noticed the most in the first quarter today, they were boxing out. And I know they got some offensive rebounds. To me, most of them were just long rebounds that the Bucks couldn't actually do that much about early in the game. I actually thought they were boxing out really well, or at least making an attempt to go find a body, which they have not been doing this year. But they weren't mentioning any of that. They just had all these buzzwords that they had planned to talk about coming into the game, and they did not adjust anything when the Bucks were killing them right off the bat. Like they didn't adjust any of their plans to talk about anything at all. And yes, I need to talk about the free throw thing. Stan Van Gundy complaining constantly while Giannis goes to the line about how long he's taking. He said something today. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he said something about why are we picking and choosing which free throw rule, or why are we picking and choosing the rules to apply to certain players? I don't know about any of the people listening right now, but I have this pet peeve about the Giannis thing. First of all, I will say I don't like that he takes that long. I think it hurts him as a shooter. I don't think it's productive. But do you know how many free throw rules are broken on every free throw? Why are we picking and choosing which ones we care about? Shooters step over the line right after they let the ball go constantly. Players are in the lane well before the shooter lets the ball go. Players are over the 3-point line well before the ball is let go. We care so much about 10 seconds being 11 or 12, but we don't care about these rules that are actually giving people an advantage. Like these are rebounding advantages when you leave early. Giannis taking 12 instead of 10 seconds is not helping him. It's probably hurting him more than anything else. Like I said, I think it makes him think more. I think it just gets him out of rhythm more. I don't like it, but it makes me so mad how everybody gets up in arms about one free throw rule, but ignores every other rule that happens at the line. And it just doesn't matter to them. I mean, those are, like I said, it's a much bigger advantage to be able to leave early or to step in and get an advantage on a box out. And really, coming from the perimeter happens a lot. I mean, guys are just standing inside the 3-point line out there. It's all it's all just a complete mess. And I agree. They either need to call it every time or they need to not call it, because Giannis would, if they would just, I would almost like for them to call it like 10 times in a row and just force him to not do it anymore. But they don't. So now they're encouraging him to, okay, they're going to do it once every like 5 games. He's going to keep doing what he's comfortable with. I Now I'm getting sidetracked on Giannis free throws, but when he plays in the Euro Cup stuff, it's a 5-second limit and they enforce it. And he shoots decently from the line in those tournaments. So I don't get I don't get why he won't just go to a shorter time. I get sometimes he just wants the rest. Like I do understand that sometimes he's catching his breath, but we don't need the mimed free throw beforehand and then him catching the ball and then him standing and staring at the rim for 6 seconds, then doing his routine. Like get the ball, shoot it. You're probably going to be better for it if you just do that.
Yeah.
Now I'm on my tangent, but my point is Stan Van Gundy complaining about that rule in particular, just because he has to fill a little more time, is basically what he was complaining about. Was him saying we could read the ad again right now while he's getting ready to shoot his free throw. Like, yeah, your job is to announce and talk during the game. You can just talk crap about the Bucks again. You've been doing it for the last 15 minutes. Just keep doing that. You can fill the space just fine, Stan. You'll be all right. Yeah. So you started being mad at them, and I got much more upset about it.
I will say the one thing about Giannis free throws that everything you said was right, so I would still agree with this. But the one part that is ridiculous is when they toss in the ball and then he tosses the ball back and then he
Yes,
takes his
that
breath
should not be
and then he
allowed.
goes over his miming of his free throws. That one's like, okay, you literally got the ball. Now you're just asking for more time.
Yes.
Um, but also while we're on the commentating and TNT in general, before we break down this game,
Oh,
um, they decided to pan away once again. Uh, like I said, we'll break it down how we got to that 40-point lead, but they decided once again that a 20-point lead or a 20-point deficit for the Knicks and Dallas was a better game than the Bucks winning by 40 points at home for the marquee game tonight. And this is the second time they've done that to us. For those who don't remember, the Bucks were playing the Heat, I think in Miami too, so
yep.
that one even felt a little bit nicer. And we were on about to break the 3-point record in the game for as many threes in a game, and they just decided to cut away. Then we can watch us break the record. And at some point you can say like, "Oh, I'm used to this. Like it's the Bucks and stuff," but like I'm also just getting even more tired of it as I get older. And again, I saw somebody tweet this, and it is true. Like if the roles were reversed, you really think they're going to pan away from the Celtics smoking the Bucks? Zero chance of that happening. Um, and I don't know. I don't know if you got a thought on that, but I mean, I
Yeah.
know you got the same thought as I do.
Yeah.
It's just I'm just so tired of like the disrespect and that coming off of what we were just talking about of how they're just bashing us the entire at least first half. At least they're more neutral towards the second half, probably because they had nothing to talk about and they panned away for 20 minutes. Um, but all of that combined, I don't know. I was supposed to be happy tonight, and they decided that you will not enjoy your life. And yeah,
We'll be happy in a few minutes, but yes, I mean, you and I watch a lot of NBA basketball. We watch a lot of TNT games. Have you ever once been watching a game and seen it pan away to a different one other than these
nope,
two Bucks games? I'm
nope.
sure it's happened. Like, I bet it has happened before, but
On top of it's not even on Bally tonight, right? So it's like
that's
that's our
where I
main
was
reason. Like that's how
that's
we're
where I was
watching the
gonna
game.
go. This is the only way Bucks fans or Celtics fans, who I sure didn't care at that point, but Bucks fans could watch this game. And ESPN, when it's an ESPN game, Bally usually covers it also, but TNT gets exclusive TV rights for games. I don't think Bally covers any TNT games. I might be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's just how it works. So if you know you're the only broadcast of the game, you can't just stop showing the game. That's not how it works. Like yeah, it's not like they cut away from a 5 point game. I get that. We weren't missing super close, intense basketball. But I have not enjoyed too many of the Bucks games recently, and I was enjoying tonight's, and I would like to be able to watch the Bucks finally having a really big game. So I guess now that we're past all of that, and we're going to talk about the really big game here. We obviously, like we kind of touched on already, got off to a very, very fast start. So what was kind of standing out to you early on in the game?
Right away, we got a couple of Dame threes coming off of his not being able to play last game because of his personal reasons, and they kind of touched on that during the game, which was nice and also horrible to hear. I don't like hearing that he's having a tough time just personally right now in his life, but it's better than the latter of people saying like he doesn't want to be here and he's mad at the coach or whatever the case may be. Maybe those could be true. I don't know. I don't think that's true, but maybe. And but like I said, good and bad that that's the reason. So I hope he's doing better with that. But I think even his shots today, even just shooting those first two, it looked like, I mean, you're shooting him right away. I know he's confident all the time when he's shooting, but even the way he shot him, it's just more of like an actual shot. Like he kind of gets like almost like a little bit of a flick going when he shoots, and he's kind of
Yep.
in a rhythm. So even the ones that he missed today, I think he was probably like 3 for 8 off memory or something like that. But they all looked really good to me. He had one that was like short, but I noticed that right away. And I noticed his defense intensity too, which I think we brought up a couple times, where it gives me a little more. I'm a little bit more encouraged, I think, going into like a playoff series, thinking about it, because you can kind of see when he steps up and he does get engaged on defense. Um, and he really gets into it and he makes it difficult, at least for the other guy. He's not going to be this Drew Holiday we'll talk about, but he can hold his own at the very least and make it difficult for guys. And we did see that. And you talked about the defensive rebound and everything like that. I think it all just kind of goes together there with the energy on that side of the ball. And yeah, that was Dame, and then for Giannis, we saw Drew and Giannis again, like you were saying, when we played him last time, and Giannis started out a little bit weird. He had like one where he dribbled off his leg, and then Drew pulled the chair in him. But besides that, I mean, Giannis was flying past him, uh, and really got to his spots. Besides that, so um, I kind of made a joke. I said that no matter how Drew does tonight, they're just going to show him pulling the chair in Giannis, and that'll be his one stat if this doesn't go the way that we want it to go. But we won by 30 or whatever, so I guess that was a good thing. But yeah, I mean, Giannis and Dan didn't play a ton of minutes or anything like that, so that was also good. We were talking about how can we just blow out a team and just get them some rest, because it was nice that, like I said, horrible that Dame had to sit out for those reasons, but even if he was all jolly and everything outside of it. He probably needed a break regardless, because he's been going at it for a while. And that's just something with this season too. I think a lot of stars obviously have to play more, but I'm kind of hoping Giannis gets a break at some point, and he probably does need one. But if we can give him a break in this sense, that was nice. One thing I noticed too in this game is, and you can maybe speak to this part, you can jump in here, is we left, not always, but it seemed like we kind of left the paint more with Brook. We kind of had to decide if Brook was going to guard Porzingis out in the perimeter versus kind of leaving him just in the paint. And it worked out well. I think guys were just moving better too. I think we covered it a little bit better, but I noticed that right away, where it's like, oh, we got like nobody down low like we normally do, not Brook in a complete drop. And it's rare when you play guys like Porzingis where you do have to make that choice of I can't just sit under the rim or go back and forth from the paint and the rim and constantly while Porzingis is at the top of the key and can shoot. Um, but I think just looking forward to like a playoff matchup or something, that's probably going to be a bigger one, Brook versus Porzingis, how we're going to handle that. If Porzingis is healthy by then, who knows? But I guess you everything on that before we get anything deeper into this game. Maybe how would you cover it? Um, and yeah, because I think that's probably going to be the one kind of thing that we got to decide. I mean, we can talk about trades and stuff too, but I think Brook not being as athletic, maybe it's a Porzingis in some senses. I think he's going to have to move a little bit more against the Celtics than he normally does. So how would you handle that?
Yeah, that's it's definitely going to be one of the questions they're going to have to answer. I do think today that Brook was higher up on screens, like you were saying. He was not, he was trying to cut off the ball handler rather than like dropping back and trying to make him take a floater. With anybody who can pick and pop, and Porzingis is one of the best at it, I think you kind of have to do that. If you can switch, that's the most easy way to cover a pick and pop, but you're not switching Dame onto Porzingis on even on the perimeter. He can just it's like nobody's guarding him. If he's going up for a shot, it's there's nobody there. Um, Brook, like you said, was doing a good job. I thought at least getting in the space of Porzingis when he took his shots. There's going to be nights where Porzingis is more hot from three and can just make those shots anyway. Frankly, I don't think you can stop him from getting those shots. So I think as a defender, you kind of have to do your best just to be there and to make it difficult as you can. He's gonna get that pick and pop shot. If you had a guy like Drew who could just get through screens and you didn't really have to worry about the big trying to help at all on it, then maybe you could cover it, but not with, I mean, barring trades like you said. I think what they did tonight is probably the best way to do it. You're going to need the guards to be able to stay somewhat attached to whoever the ball handler is. And they, like you said, I thought Dame's defensive intensity right off the bat was as good as we have seen it, at least in like non crunch time when he tends to turn it up a little bit. But he seemed to come out with kind of a in general, I mean, I want to talk about too that he came out like I loved seeing him take shots right off the bat and trying to get his right away. And I loved when he pulled up. We were up by almost, it was probably 25 at the time, and he was feeling it. And he pulled up from like well beyond the hash mark from probably 3 steps past half court. And it was just back rimmed. Like it was on target. It looked pretty good out of his hand. I think he thought he got fouled on the play, if I remember it right.
Hmm.
But he still almost made it. And to me, like when he starts taking those shots, that's when I feel like, based on one, watching him a lot over the course of his career, just as a big Dame fan, but now watching him really intently since he's been on the Bucks, when he starts pulling from that logo type range, that's when you know he's feeling it. He doesn't do it when he's not feeling really good, unless it's just nobody's guarding him out there and he thinks he has to do it. But when I saw him pull that and he had already made some shots, I was like, okay, he's really feeling good today. And the defense was good. But yeah, I think, just to wrap up that question, I do think the best way to guard that screening from Porzingis is how they did it today. The only issue that can happen is he rolled a couple times when I think the Bucks were expecting him to pop. And I remember one with Chris and Brooke where he just, I mean, nobody was within 10 feet of him and he got a free dunk at the rim. That is one of the hard parts if you have a guy kind of going over like Brooke was to cut off the ball handler right away. If they roll and the guy can't, the guy who was guarding the ball handler at the time can't help at least slow him down, there's going to be a lot of open lanes, especially with how Griff has the Bucks guarding off ball, which they're pretty they kind of hug the guys off ball, and then they have to run a long ways if they're going to help kind of tag that roller. So it could be, I'm sure it would be a back and forth in a series where both coaches are kind of making adjustments, and Porzingis starts rolling more to try and counter what the Bucks are doing, and then the Bucks might go back into the drop a little bit more and trying to mix coverages. But if he's popping like he did almost the whole game today, yeah, I would just continue what they were doing and probably just work on getting a little better at it too.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess the other big keys in this one too, obviously you mentioned the rebounding. We out rebound them by 20. And some of those obviously are just crap minutes at that point. But that was the big difference, I think, on that side of the ball. And their fans will say it's a back to back and they were tired and all that stuff. But I mean, you clearly wanted to show up for this one and beat us. And Drew had a quote and said like, "Oh yeah, we're confident we can beat him again." That's fine. Obviously, he's supposed to think that way. He's playing us. Um, but I mean, they wanted this one, so I don't really don't want to hear anything from their fans. And um, yeah, I mean, once we hit that 25-0 run, we just kind of never looked back. And then they came out in the second half and didn't play any of their starters, which again wasn't even really mentioned that much by the broadcast. Something that was that crazy. It just kind of was mentioned like Joe Mazzulla was just brilliant for doing this, and it was a coach's decision. And um, I can only imagine if the Bucks did that, what the articles would be written about the Bucks if they're down by almost 40 at halftime and they set all their starters against a big opponent like that. But I think another thing I wanted to point out, sort of with the rushing and stuff too, um, and with like again, we talk about trades and stuff, but I think this is going to be a new need that I thought about with I've noticed and we've talked about it in the past of like Dame playing like a whole first quarter or Dame playing like a whole third quarter, which we didn't really have to see it again because they sat the second half. This is kind of a note I made in the first half. I didn't think it could get away from us, but I I do think as far as like minutes and rotations go, I would kind of like to see that broken up a little bit more, and that way we can see Dame in like earlier in fourth quarters or just have the opportunity to throw him out there because in some of these games and in the past too, so like I said, it's not really related to this one. I thought it was going to be after the first quarter because I noticed how Dame was kind of in there the entire first quarter again. Um, and I was kind of thinking, well, we can kind of put Giannis back out there, then sit Dame, and kind of make it work. And then we did bring Giannis back in, and Dame ended up staying in and kind of did his same old stuff. But I guess for me, that's just a bigger move that I'd probably like to see is somebody that we can get some guard help to where I mentioned like Chris Dunn. I don't think it has to be like a crazy guy who's like a legit like star or something or like a star role player. Just a guy who can just be solid because I don't think Campaign is that guy, unfortunately. Um, and maybe his, I mean, did not look good again today. Um, we kind of joked that he might still be concussed. He had like a top of the three. I think the whistle was blown, but he shot the three, and I think he cracked the glass on the other side of the the rim after it was just a wide open three and it wasn't even close. Um, but I mean, he's a solid regular season guy. It's just I we just need somebody who can like I mean, Javon Carter we mentioned. He would just be gorgeous on this team right now if we can give Dame a break with Javon, or he could even play with those guys too. But just somebody like that I would like to see. And then kind of my last note, I will give Bobby some credit. Again, we had a nice Bobby game. And again, you made that point, and this is also another point that I made before we got off into the 25-0 run, but because Bobby got off to a nice kind of spurt at the end of the first quarter, which started that 25-0 run. And I was like, okay, rip him out. Like, this
Yep.
is perfect. This is exactly what I want to happen, but also, like, let's give him a break and let's get out like a more athletic rotation coming in the second quarter, but kind of keep the momentum up. We kept him in and then it ended up working anyways. But I just thought I'd give him some credit. And normally in a game that doesn't get away from us in a good way or bad way, I would like to see at the end of the first quarter of Bobby just being like, that's the perfect Bobby experience of, okay, he got hot. He did exactly what he was supposed to. Now let's rip him out and let's get on a run. But
Right.
I don't know if you got any thoughts on those two things. I know the Dame part of it, maybe this rotations in general. How would do you like the way Dame's being played right now, or do you think that we should get somebody to kind of be able to break it up a little bit?
I have no issue with. I- I'm fine with Dame playing the first and then playing the third. I know you text me about it a lot, but like campaign starting the fourth is never super fun to watch, obviously. I think to me, I Dame could probably sit like the last 2 minutes of the third, and then he sits the first couple minutes of the fourth. He usually comes in at like the 7 minute mark of the fourth. If you could break it up where Payne isn't playing 5 straight minutes, but maybe he finishes the third, or you put in someone like Ajax to finish the third, and then Payne plays a couple minutes in the fourth just to have a ball handler, and then Dame starts then. Like I could see that. It doesn't bother me as much. Cam was actually 3 of 4 today and 1 of 2 from three. He missed the one after the whistle really bad, and he missed his one miss was the exact same way. It missed completely only backboard. So um, the two misses really stuck out, but he did go 3 of 4, and I didn't think that either. I just went and looked right now, but um, yeah, I mean, I either way, I think you would prefer to have a defensive guard who can handle the ball. I mean, that's the dream pickup right now. Is somebody? I mean, Chris Dunn would fit what the Bucks could use in terms of he could play other minutes. Like right now, Payne just mostly, as he should, plays just when Dame needs a break and they need a ball handler out there. Once in a while, he stays in and plays with him or plays with Beasley and him, and that I'm not a fan of that. But for now, just handling the ball, he doesn't turn it over too much. He takes some bad shots, but he doesn't turn it over much. But you're definitely not getting very good defense from him. Um, so yeah, I think, like you said, if you can pick up somebody who can defend the ball better than him and can handle the ball and could be the guy taking those minutes when Dame's not on the court, then these rotations are a lot easier to swallow, I think, because it's just you're not worried about the few minutes that Dame's not out there in the fourth. Um, but a lot of teams do end up without starters starting the fourth, I would say, because they want them to be able to finish the fourth. So I do think a lot of times campaign ends up out there with or against other teams, kind of a couple starters and backups too. So I don't think it's usually like he's out there and he has to worry about being up against whoever they're like. He wouldn't be too often matched up with Derek White and Drew if they're playing the Celtics and it was actually a close game and the Celtics actually played their guys in the second half. Um, but it is, I mean, it's tough sometimes when you start watching that fourth quarter and you don't have Dame out there. Giannis hasn't really been starting fourth quarters very often either. A lot of times it's Payne with Chris and a lot of times it's Bobby and Brooke out there to start the fourth, which I also am not a big fan of. So um, I just think the lineup in general could be better at the end of the fourth or at the beginning of the fourth. I don't know that it's as much about Payne as it is just the entire combination that they're deciding to put out there. Um, like I talked about earlier, it doesn't even have to be Pat, but that's a slow lineup when it's Chris, Bobby, and Brooke out there together. And I just can't imagine. There's a possibility if I went to go check the net rating for that 3-man lineup that it would be really good. I just would have a hard time betting on that right now. I haven't looked into that at all, but I think it's just a combination more than it is like campaign playing over Drew or over Dame is making a huge difference. I think it's campaign playing with Bobby and Brooke and maybe Pat or guys like that. That's just a tough lineup in general. And if you had Dame in there instead, then you would feel a lot better for sure.
Yeah. And I talked about too how like our championship year we had like Jeff Teague back there. Like I don't think we necessarily need a backup point guard. It's just I guess I don't like being sort of handcuffed sometimes of like Dame's gassed and now I literally can't put him in if the option was there. Um but like I said, we could put like I think we could just make it work outside of it being just like a campaign problem. But just this thing that I saw. But in general too, I was planning on ripping Adrian Griffin a little bit before this game. But he did, like I said, this it could turn around in a second in a game, and we could get off to a good stretch and then whatever. But I guess the point that I had to sort of wrap these two games up is I've just seen a lot of sort of I don't know about back and forth on Twitter, but I guess it has been, but about Adrian and um how good of a job he's done and should we give him a break and like cut him some slack and everybody has tough stretches and I saw one tweet and I mean it's a fair question to ask too. Okay, it's not like a horrible tweet. It is fair. Like everyone has bad stretches. You could probably find the Nuggets last year or the Warriors the year before and they had bad stretches, but just pulling like 5 game samples from our championship year, I don't think is very helpful at all because there's literally zero context to that. Um, like pulling like a 5 game sample from like uh January of 2021 and being like, oh, imagine if we fired Bud. Bud was gonna get fired that year if we didn't make it to the finals or Eastern Conference Finals or even lost that game 6 it was in against the Nets. Like it was going to happen. So like that's not a really great argument because he was on the fence. And that year, like I've mentioned it in the past too, of it was shaky that year. Like until we got PJ and you mentioned it, like even during like some of those stretches, there were like COVID like stretches, like
Yeah.
people couldn't play for some of those games.
The five
So
game stretch that you are referring to, Drew Holiday was out for those 5 games exactly with COVID. They lost 5 games
yeah,
in a row. They didn't have Drew, and they hadn't yet even picked up Teague, I want to say. I'm pretty sure Lindell Wigington played a lot of minutes during that stretch.
yeah. And like I said, it's a fair point because everybody has a bad stretch and you could point to our like 2020 season like in the bubble. I mean, obviously it's the bubble, but we had a horrible stretch there in the bubble and we're on the pace to win 70 games that year at one point. But I just think without like zero context to a season and you're just pointing to like schedules, like it does not really helpful to your argument for Adrian Griffin. Um, but also like I said, to be positive, like I do think he can turn it around and this game is a could be a very nice like jump start to that, and I hope it is. And we did see some different stuff today too, and I don't know. I guess I just wanted to end on that for to wrap him up because I do rip him sometimes, and I was like I said, I was planning on ripping him, because I'm just really tired of people defending like anything and everything he does, and like we should just be calm and relaxed and like just enjoy the ride type of vibes, and it's just like. I am. I'm trying to enjoy it. I just want to raise some questions. Again, I talked about like John Horst. Like I think John Horst, like all the problems, like we don't know everything. Like we're not saying everything perfectly, but like even like the national broadcast can point out all of our defensive problems. Like, yeah, John Horst knows that. He's gonna figure it out. Like, he has been one of the smarter GMs or executives in the league. So when I talk about like trading Bobby and stuff or whatever, like it's just kind of how the NBA works and like to get better. Unfortunately, you got to trade those types of guys because you got to match salaries and all that. And we'll get into that like later episodes. But like I do think like John knows what our problems are, and we have problems. Like our record's not the end all be all. This stretch is not the end all be all. We could still be very good. We can win the championship this year if this is the same exact roster somehow. Like I wouldn't be shocked. It's just like I don't think the bickering back and forth sometimes I don't think is super necessary. Like I don't think I'm 100% right in this. I don't think a person who's defending him is 100% right either. But okay, I think it's my last rant today. Do you got anything on that part of it?
Oh yeah,
Because
I
you're
do.
probably more in it than I am, but I've just seen it.
I do my best not to partake in the back and forth on there because I think both sides are mostly coming from places of bad faith. Um, like you said, a lot of it is people just, and I'm certain that I am partially guilty of this. Like you're confirming your priors. The people who hated the hiring, which I'll raise my hand. I did not want Adrian Griffin to be the coach. I didn't. And I didn't want him when I heard he was interviewed at all. When he was a finalist, I was like, okay, well, at least it ought to be one of the other two because there's no reason Adrian Griffin should be getting this job over Atkinson or Nurse. When they hired Griffin, I wasn't happy about it. I am certain that some of the things and some of the stuff that I nitpick is because of that. And I'm aware of that. And I try not to have that be the case. I also think, like you were touching on, he does try different things. He's willing to work on stuff. But as I talked about on our last Bucks podcast, some of the stuff he won't change is like the most obvious. And it doesn't make any sense. And like I said, maybe he started to a little bit with now Beasley's not guarding people 30 feet beyond the 3-point line when he picks them up. But it's just for me, it's always been okay. There's an obvious way that things can work, and it's okay to test things out. And I remember when Bud started like messing around with a zone once in a while and messing around with different pick and roll coverages just a little bit, not much. He didn't do it much. But when he did, everyone was like, okay, well, we can deal with some struggles because he's laid a really good foundation. My issue is the Bucks have no foundation at the moment. They haven't settled on, and Giannis said this, they haven't settled on a foundation that actually makes sense. I shouldn't say they don't have a foundation. They kind of have one, but it doesn't make any sense for what their current roster is capable of. We haven't touched on this, but it's the worst team in the NBA at generating turnovers. And Griffin's entire idea of this defense is to generate turnovers. And we are the worst in the league. So you need to change. You have to be willing to try and make a different approach to what you're doing. And Giannis said it, and I don't have his quote up right now, but he said, we don't take away the three. We don't take away the paint. We don't take away the free throw line. We don't defensive rebound. He's like, so what is our defensive identity? And if players this is halfway into the season now, if players can't tell you exactly what your defensive identity is, that is an issue. That doesn't mean that he can't figure things out. Like you said, that does not mean that he will never be a good coach or that the Bucks can't have a good season this year. But it bothers me when people are on Twitter take every single pushback against what he's doing as you're not giving him a chance. You're not doing like, no, first of all, we are, like I said, halfway into the season, basically. This is a big chunk of games now. He's had a pretty big sample size. This is not the first couple weeks when people were overreacting about some stuff. It's pretty hard to not draw conclusions from the sample that we have at this point. Like there is plenty to go off of. He can still change that, but people are allowed to be concerned. And we've said that before. People are also allowed to be, I envy the people who are just, honestly, I envy you people who are out there going, it's fine. Like we'll figure it out. Well, like I wish I could think that way. I wish that was the way I was looking at it because that seems like a much more positive outlook on how things are going. And you're probably happier than I am when you're watching these games. But to me, I'm always worried, and Gunnar can vouch for this. I am worst case scenario thinker for sports all the time. And like Gunnar asked, this is a perfect example. Gunnar asked me in like the middle of the third, like, if the Bucks pull their starters, do you want to just record this during the fourth quarter? And I'm not kidding you. In my head, I was like, I watched our bench almost give up a 20-point lead to the Pacers in like 3 minutes. I was like, I'm not watching till this game is over. TNT
Then I was
called
like,
it.
well, yeah, you got a point.
TNT called it well before I did. I can tell you that when I started watching other games,
Yeah.
I still wasn't ready to be like, yep, we won it. And that's how my head works. Going back, I mean, just one more small example. Game 7 of the Nets series when there's 0.3 left and we passed the ball into Brook and he got fouled when he absolutely did not. He tipped the ball up in the air and then they fouled him and they blew the whistle and said he had to shoot free throws. And in my head, everybody's already celebrating. KD has already congratulated the Bucks at this point. And I'm going, if Brook misses the first one and makes the second, they could call timeout and shoot like a half-court shot. They had a timeout left, or they could shoot like a really quick three because the 0.3 is enough time to catch and shoot. Like I did not celebrate until Brook made the second free throw and they passed the ball and then the buzzer went off because my head works in a way where everything could go wrong. I don't expect everything to go wrong, but I think of every situation where something could go wrong because I am ready to be hurt at all times. And that's part of what it is with Griffin for me. Like, just to get you inside my head, for if you're listening, I worry about stuff a lot in terms of when I see concerns and I don't really see them being addressed. I imagine how much they could hurt us in a series against the Heat or the Celtics or the Sixers. And that's how I end up viewing every game instead of viewing it like in the lens of, oh yeah, we won the game. Like I used to do that when the Bucks weren't expected to be a championship level team. But now that they are, like I view stuff through, is this going to help us win a championship or is this going to help us have a decent regular season and then kind of fade out like we did last year? So now we're both probably done ranting, I think. But do you have anything you
Well,
want
I'll
to
I'll
add?
say this to get inside my head to give the viewers my aspect of this. I feel like I like talking a little crap to the other teams and I like feeling confident about my team. So like even in the like 2021 series, obviously the finals year, like I'm in the crowd of like outside of Pfizer, even that same exact game you're talking about, and I'm just like have like this unwavering confidence for some reason. I don't know why I thought we were gonna win the game. Like I don't know why. It's almost like I probably thought like it was all over anyways because of the way that series was so back and forth. But like I like that part of the game where I can like feel confident and like, oh yeah, we got this. We're gonna win this. Like I'm gonna like brag about my team. Um, and then when I don't feel that way, that's when I get a little defensive because I'm like, I can't act like that this year because I don't have any confidence in this team because we can give up 150 points at any moment in any game to anybody, really. I mean, we just saw it to the Jazz. Like, who would have expected that to the Jazz? The Pacers, I can maybe understand that a little bit, but like the Jazz, are you serious? And um, yeah, I guess that's just my brain. And to wrap those games up, um, I don't know. Like, it's not so, it's kind of a tangent, so it's not like wrapping the games up at this point. But we're happy we won. Um, and to that point, I do hope that we're talking about stretches. This could be a stretch that we look back on and we could say this was when we started to get it going. Um, and we did kind of start to get a little bit of an identity. So hopefully that's the case. Um, I did mention 2021 and that PJ topic, and I guess that could segue us into one of the topics that we had. One that we've kind of wanted to talk about for a couple weeks. Um, and the more that it's kind of progressing here with ever since PJ got traded to the Clippers, he really has not played at all. He got a little bit of run when he first got there, but he's just completely out of the rotation. Um, and fans really have been on this right away. It's why it was nice that we waited because now it feels really realistic, but they've been kind of thinking that he might get bought out at some point. And the Bucks should jump on him. Um, I guess I'll throw my quick points here first because I feel like I was always pretty realistic about PJ even when we had him. I liked him and I love his energy and everything like that. This is now I'm going back in 2021. Um,
Yeah, you
I
were
just
happy.
always felt like I always just felt like, well, I'm getting there. I always felt like he was more of zero sounds bad because I don't that sounds like he's like he brings nothing. I just think he brings something and I just think a guy who doesn't shoot at all, he really didn't even look to shoot some of those games. And I mean, I listened to the Jeff Teague podcast. He was kind of joking how everybody in the bench was just like they're rooting for PJ, but they're like he's getting torched by KD right now. And like it takes effort to like be able to hang on a guy like that for he didn't play 48 minutes, but theoretically we'll just say that's how long a game is. Um damn near he probably played 40 minutes some of
They
those
both were
games.
playing like 40 plus
Yeah.
for
I
sure.
know KD was. He might have played 50 in the overtime game or whatever it
Oh
was.
yeah, he did.
Although that math makes no sense, but we'll just ignore that.
He played
Uh
53 in game 7. He didn't
he
sit.
did?
He didn't sit
Oh
in game
yeah, yeah, I
7.
guess he did.
Yeah.
Um, but anyways, yeah, I just think that version of PJ, if we had that right now, that being said, I think on this team that actually works perfect if we get a guy like that defensively. And that's all he has to worry about and focus. And it obviously worked back then. I mean, we won the championship and he worked like we needed a guy like that. Especially because we had a smaller rotation then too. But I just think this version of PJ, even if I was semi wrong back then about PJ, there's probably a slight reason why he's not playing right now. That's because he's probably not as, and even thinking back to like when he's on the Heat, that was like if we had that Heat player, a guy who shot like 40, he probably shot like
It
mid to
was
high
40.
40s 3 point, yeah,
Yeah.
and like not scared to shoot it all, plus doing everything that I just said he was doing. Like Yeah, I'll take that player. That was like what I was asking for. And like I said, he still worked with us. I'm not saying that. Um, but even in that regular season, I think he was like a negative with us before we got to the playoffs. And that's just like rotation stuff. We figured it out, so it's fine. But I just think this is kind of my brain again, but he's gonna bring like that leadership quality. So I do think that's a positive. But as far as like should he be playing those 40 minutes again with us if we did kind of get him in a buyout? Probably not. And I love PJ. I think he's obviously cemented in like history with us. Like I'll buy him a drink if I ever saw him in a bar or whatever. I don't go to bars very much, but if I did, that would be. And I saw PJ Tucker, and the one time I went, maybe I saw PJ Tucker there and I'd buy him a drink. Um, but yeah, I love him. I love his personality, but I would take him in a heartbeat here, especially now on this roster because I think we do need that leadership. But as far as like playing, yeah, I don't think he would help much. But what do you think about PJ Tucker in 2024 now it is?
Yeah, I agree with you. So, first of all, I've seen some Bucks fans who are like, why don't we just trade Pat? Because they have similar like I'm not trading for PJ right now.
No,
That's not happening. If he gets bought out, I would absolutely find a way to get him onto the roster. Um, like you touched on. Now, first of all, is he going to come here if he's not going to play? Because right now his issue is that he's not playing. So
true.
I think he would have to play at times, and I don't he would be a better defender than a lot of the people we have, and that's not even saying he's a great defender anymore. He's okay, but he would still be a better defender than what we have in a lot of ways. I do think there's always been a bit of an underrated part of his offensive game, which is that he understands his role so well on offense and he's willing to not take shots. He talked about it at one point, but it's hard to be out there and just defend. Nobody wants to talk about you doing that. You don't score any points. Nobody's going to bring you up after the game and be like, yeah, he did this. He did like he was getting in terms of numbers, KD was putting up an insane series against him. I do think we should probably talk about how he told Bud to leave him on an island and not let anyone else beat us. And KD damn near did it, and it was one of the most impressive things I've ever seen in that series. But in the end, PJ was right that if nobody else was able to beat us, it was going to be really hard for KD to carry them for that long and that far into the series. And like I said, he almost did because it was, I mean, if you think back, yeah, he was torching PJ, but was PJ away? Like he was in him, he was under him, he was right up in his body, in his
Yeah.
airspace, and he was just not missing. And PJ gets ripped on a lot for that, but I still think the fact that he told Bud that, like, okay, we're doing this because Jeff Green just put up 9 threes against us. We're not letting that happen again. and like, and that changed game 6 and 7. It really, really did. Um, but yeah, I think the leadership is the biggest thing. Somebody who, honestly, frankly, like I said, he kind of bossed Bud around a little bit. I don't think Griff having somebody doing that would be the worst thing in the world right now. A player who is willing to kind of, we already know he listens to players. He's gotten some of his better changes from the players, but
Mhm.
someone who's willing to kind of do that isn't a bad thing. He would have to play. If you, I would play him in like a Giannis lineup at the 4 or 5 instead of Bobby, and I would feel much better about that lineup, to be honest with you. Depending on, you'd probably need like Dame or at least Chris out there too, because you need somebody, you need at least another scorer on the court. But I would feel better defensively if he's playing the 4 or 5 with Giannis than Bobby. And if you put like Crowder out there and PJ, I could see that being a pretty annoying team. Crowder's a good enough shooter and stuff where that can, you're still only going to have one offensive liability. But again, this is, first of all, I don't think he would come to the Bucks in a buyout because I think somebody could offer him more playing time and would be more willing to. But that's the only way I would bring him in still. Like I said, we're not trading for PJ and we should not. He's also got one more year beyond this on that contract. He's going to be 40. Yeah, I'm not trading out one of our few assets, which how much of an asset is Pat? Who knows? But he's a contract that at least matches up with some people that could be helpful. I'm not doing that for PJ just to pay him 9 million again next year at 40 years old. Like that's not, you can't do that. That would be a bad use of what you have. But I would take him. I would take him on the team, and I would find a spot for him, whether that's Robin's spot. Thanasis' spot is never going away, so that's not going to get emptied for him. But, or it could be after the deadline when possibly we've opened up a spot just by making
Mhm.
other moves. So unless you have anything else to add on PJ, I think we could talk about the other thing we've got, which is kind of, we're not going to talk super specific here, but just kind of looking at, we talked about it earlier, the young guys, the four young guys that are all pretty, at least have different intriguing aspects of what they can do. Um, we're going to talk a little bit here about which ones are you willing to trade? Would you be willing to trade if you were John Horst? Which ones would you not be willing to trade, and kind of why or why not? So, which one of the four, I guess, would you be most hesitant to move? So we're talking Marjan, Ajax, AJ Green, and Livingston. I guess give me the one you'd be most willing to move and the one you'd be least willing to move.
So most willing to move, I think obviously would be Livingston, unfortunately, even though we did to see a good stretch from him, but I don't think he's got much value. Um, Least willing to move would be Ajax right now. Um, and honestly, it's a toss up between Green and Marjan for me, which is kind of shocking when I went into the year. Um, but I think in general, I was kind of speaking generalities because I might kind of shock you a little bit here, but I would trade all of them right now if the trade was right.
Yep.
Um, and if you ask me if I had like the same group of players, even like last year or the year before that or 2021, maybe then I would have still traded because we were more on the clock. We didn't have a championship yet. But last 2 years, knowing that we don't really have many draft picks in the future and the the young talent and we didn't have it, so it's hard to think about it. But I mean, knowing that we didn't have the young talent then, I would probably be like, yeah, I kind of want to keep it. That's why we fought about the Dante trade because I'm like, this is like our one. I just feel like it was bad asset management, even though I know that Brooke was kind of whatever. That's a whole different discussion. But having a young guy who's like solid, I just feel like that was kind of a bad move just because we don't have that really. Um, I just think now with Dame our clock has completely shifted now. Like you have to try to win a championship at all costs within the next 3, 4 years, however long he's here. I think he's got an option, but either way, the next 3 years he's going to be a solid player. Next two for sure, and I don't think you can pass up on an opportunity to get somebody um, at any cost. And we don't have first round draft picks too. So I mean, if somebody values Marchand like a first round draft pick type of player, still. Um, I don't know if I would, but if somebody else does and it spices up a deal, I'm definitely not going to stop. And I value Ajax like that right now for sure. And maybe people don't view him like that right now, but I do. But I mean, if we can toss in those guys in a deal that could get us a solid player right now to help us for a championship this year, I 1000% would do it, which I think even shocked me. But having Dame, like I said, really has changed my mind on a lot of stuff. And I don't know, I'm sure you view that similarly, but what do you think?
Yeah. So I agree with you that I would not say any of these guys are untouchable. I mean, these are end of first round or second round or undrafted picks. They're not untouchable players. They're all interesting in their own way, which we talked about a little bit earlier. I think the one I'm most willing to move is Marjan. And it's not because I think he's the worst of the four, but I think it's the combination of maybe not being as good as some people think and possibly having more value than some of the other guys still because a team might view him as okay, we like this guy in the draft. I'm sure a decent amount of teams had a first round grade on him. He's shown some flashes. Those types of guys tend to have a little bit more of like value within the league still, just because of that draft. Um, I mean, the cachet kind of that they bring with them, where they're just people remember them from the draft. Teams scouted them a lot during the draft. They think, oh, the Bucks aren't handling them right. We could make this change and we could figure them out and we could start finding that potential, and that's not even impossible. That might actually be the case. Um, but for me, he's the one I'm most willing to move because I don't personally think that there's a huge future in front of him, and I think that he, like I said, would probably be the one that a team could have the most value on him if they were ranking these four. Least willing, I would agree. I'd say Ajax. I he needs to calm down a bit. That's my only issue with him at the moment. I don't want it to compare him to him, but there are some Thanasis tendencies where he all of a sudden just
I was
gets,
just gonna say that, yeah.
yeah, where he gets like a little freaked out almost and just starts going nuts when something like he misses an offensive rebound by a foot. So now he just goes and like tackles a guy. It's like, no, dude, just get back, play defense. You're you're gonna be fine. Um, I think defensively, I think he has all of the tools to be a very solid on-ball defender or a really, really good like roaming small ball four type of guy. I think right now on ball, he does not get low enough. I think he's very like upright in his stance, and that's why he's always just a step. He's still the way he's so upright and can still like stop on a dime and try and contest shots is really impressive. But I think it takes him an extra step to do it most of the time because of how upright he is in his stance and how locked his legs are a lot when he's moving. And I think it causes him to get fouls too because it looks like he's like bumping him with his chest really hard when really I don't even think he is doing it half the time, but it looks like a foul. And a rookie who looks like he's fouling is definitely going to get called for fouls. Um, I just think long term, there is the potential for him to be a special defensive player. And along with the IQ and like you texted me, he gets that offensive. Was it it was an air ball, right? That he passed out to Brook because the shot clock didn't reset.
Yeah, or like it just nicked off the rim or something. He caught it midair and then tossed it out to the 3-point line and Brook got a three.
Yeah, and just hit him like right in the shooter's pocket too. It was a perfect pass. Um, and we've seen him do that a bunch of times. Now, on the flip side of that, there's been a decent amount of times where he has just kicked out a pass where he probably could have just went up and finished. And that type of stuff. He's far from a finished product. And I think in some cases I probably expected a little bit more in terms of him being able to really, really hold his own right now. Um, but I also think that some of the numbers are skewed because of the lineups he's been in. And I will say, I don't think that right now him and Giannis can work together too often unless it's them playing the four and the five. If you put Livingston in with Giannis and Bobby or Port or Brook, like it doesn't work. The spacing's not going to be there. Those two are going to clog up the same areas and they're not going to be Ajax is shooting pretty well on wide open shots, but they're still not going to worry about him. Um, so, but if he's playing the four and Giannis is playing the five, or if you want to flip him like they did in the Rockets game when he guarded Sengun most of the time, that I think could work, but it's still a tough match at the moment. So him finding a way to be productive with Giannis is going to be super important moving forward. I just think, like I said, I think the defensive potential is as good as any Buck that I can really remember in terms of being able to literally guard 1 through 5. I think he could do that at his peak. Um, and the fact that he does make open shots, which I didn't honestly expect this early, and he is a pretty smart passer. He's got good vision. He knows how to hit guys in a good position to shoot, which is kind of something when people hit, to me, one of the biggest things to watch for a passer is somebody who hits guys in their shooting pocket and they don't have to have wasted movement to go into their shot. And it seems like he does that a ton. And he does it from like impressive angles that you wouldn't think he could get it off for. So for me, I don't know that he probably has similar value to MarJon would be my guess around the league. But I think there's more long-term potential to help than I would see with MarJon. And so that's just kind of why they're on opposite ends. And then I won't go too deep into Green and Livingston, but I would like to hold on to Livingston because I am seeing these flashes and I don't think he has much value. So you're just not going to be, if somebody, again, with all four of these guys, if they come along with the right offer, they're movable. But I don't think he would be somebody that everybody's like, yeah, we got to get Chris Livingston in this deal. So I would try and avoid it if I can. And then with AJ Green, I I don't know. I mean, we didn't talk about him at all in the Celtics game, but he looked pretty fun. Like he
Yeah.
his shot is gorgeous. I think I said it before we got on, but like Sam Hauser, you watch Sam Hauser and he's able to hold his own in real minutes for the Celtics. I could 100% see AJ Green being like a shorter guard version of Hauser offensively. And I think he could be at least hold your own defensively as well. So I like him. I think it's going to be hard for him and Livingston, like we talked about, to get too much playing time this year. And that's why they're movable if somebody really is willing to part with a good piece to include them. But yeah, I mean, that's where I am on the four. I think we're pretty similar in general on the overview. It's just slightly different on the names and how we would view it.
Mhm.
But um, any thoughts after that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Marshawn might be viewed a little bit higher because he might be one of those guys. I know you texted me this, but like a bad team might value him and think like, oh, if he gets like 25, 28 minutes, he might be able to be like a scorer versus like what he is with us. He doesn't really shoot much, so he's Tony Snell like we talked about. Um, so maybe they see like untapped potential there offensively with him versus like Ajax, where he's kind of he's got room to grow for sure. But I mean, he is what he is. Like he can just perfect at his craft versus like grow into something else, I guess. Um, and I did want to touch. I'm glad you touched on Green because, like I said, we're gonna give him some love, and we haven't. But it's just unfortunate that he hasn't played as much as maybe he should have. I mean, he's played less minutes than he did last year. But again, you laid it out. It's because we have more bodies and guys playing in front of him. It just kind of sucks. But I think if we did get like in a scenario where we traded Marjan and Ajax or one or the other, um, and we did like a 2-for-1 trade or that would be like a 3-for-1 or something, and somehow another spot opened up. Like you said, I think that he could actually hold his own pretty well. And his shot, like you said, is just insanely good. And he got a just to end it off, he got that tip against the 7-footer in like garbage time in this last game against the Celtics tonight. And I think the athlete is very sneaky with him. I saw last year with I was just on TikTok and literally randomly. This is like honestly, it was on my For You page. I'm like, it's just like a random white guy's like hoop mixtape. And I'm like, wait, that's AJ Green. Why is this on my For You page? And he was hooping in high school, like dunking on people, crossing people up. And it's not like a Thon Maker type of situation where I was sending you videos of Thon Maker in high school crossing people up. And I'm like, this is what he could be. I don't think he's going to be that exactly in the NBA, obviously, but it just kind of shows you the athlete that's kind of there that maybe people don't get to see because he's just kind of a catch and shoot 3-point guy. But in those garbage time minutes, and he is kind of gets to be his himself, it kind of sneaks up a little bit sometimes, and he can dribble a little bit. He can kind of create his own shot a
Mhm.
little bit more than I thought he could. Um, and I don't know. It's kind of funny to think about him because last year it just kind of seemed like a guy who would just run in the corner, have a great shot still, and shoot it. Um, but then to find out that he's just like this incredible athlete too, it's pretty funny. So I would like to see him get more of a shot, but obviously I think
Yeah.
somebody had a good quote too, like I think it was Frank Madden or something. He's just like, I feel like every NBA fan like wants to see their young guys play. So it's
Yeah.
hard because there's so much untapped potential, but if something would have to open up for him to play, but I said it earlier in this podcast, but it's just nice that we literally have 4 guys that we can talk about and we can like say, oh, I actually kind of like this part about them or whatever, when we couldn't even really have one in the past some of these years. So, a lot different and yeah.
Yeah. No, with Green, I think you touched on it. I mean, the thing is, you go look at high school mixtapes and you're not going to find an NBA player that didn't look like an absolute monster. That's why they ended up being better than everyone else. Yeah. For those who have never seen Kayvon Looney's high school mixtape, you have to go watch Kayvon Looney's. He looks like Kevin Durant. Like he was shooting pull-up threes. I saw him play. I mean, he's from the Milwaukee area. I saw him play once in high school. I thought he was going to be I thought he was going to be Kevin Durant when I saw him play. I genuinely thought this dude was going to be one of the best players in I mean, he was a top 5 recruit in the country, so it's not like it was an outlandish thing to think, but think about him now. He's a rebounding, screen setting. I don't think he shot a three in years for the Warriors. And at one point, it looked like he might be Kevin Durant type of player. And so it is hard to judge it off of a high school mixtape. But even you can go back to his Northern Iowa highlights, and he handled the ball a lot. He brought the ball up a lot. You could look at, like you said, in garbage time, you see some flashes. Today, he got past somebody with a pretty nice, like, double crossover, got to the middle of the lane, pump faked a guy past him, and then did a step through for a pretty much uncontested layup at that point. And even Anderson and Stan Van Gundy were giving him props. They were so impressed by it. So um, he he shows flashes. I think there could be a really helpful offensive player and a guy who can hold his own defensively, and someone who can do that. I mean, that's at least a nice piece to have on your bench at the very worst. Um, it's just kind of nice finally, like you said, to see some people developing for the Bucks over the last couple of years when that was not the case before that. And who knows, maybe that will be something we look back on and say, hey, that was one of the big improvements from Bud to Griff, was that guys did start seeing improvements more often. I will say I don't think people keep saying that these young guys are getting more playing time under Griff. I don't think they are. I think we just have more young guys, so you see a couple
Yeah.
out there more often. But in terms of minutes, I mean, it's really not that much different. It's very similar in the end. But
We should mention too, he wouldn't be in this conversation, but we literally just have Ty Washington, who's a first round pick from
yeah, two
last year, was it even?
2 years ago, I think. But
2 years, but even so, I mean, that's just a guy sitting in the back. Not that he's gonna be anything or whatever, but like that's our flyer as like the
yeah,
fifth guy of the young guys. So
right. Yeah, and actually, I mean that leads into if we're done talking about that, we just got a couple things we wanted to wrap up with. So one of those being Ty Washington holds one two-way spot, but the other two, there's three starting this year. The other two opened up earlier this week when the Bucks cut or waived Lindell Wigington and Marcus Bolden. I believe Bolden's going to stay with the Herd now after some small G League trade they made, and Wigington, I believe, was already uh, under the rights of the Herd. So unless somebody claims him, he should also remain there. But I find it interesting because it gives you two more shots to find somebody else that could potentially join that group of four that we had that we're talking about. AJ Green was a two-way last year. Now he's viewed as one of the guys that could potentially help the team down the road or even this year a little bit. Like they're small moves, but they're small moves that teams like the Heat hit on. And even talking about Sam Hauser, he was a two-way for the Celtics at first. I believe Payton Pritchard was drafted in the second round, but then also was a two-way. So a lot of teams, if you can hit on one or two of these guys on two-way contracts, it gives you a controllable player that you will have rights to that you can go over the cap to sign. And it can be a young player that can help your team. And it doesn't have to be a star. And it almost never will be. But if you can get role players instead of having to pay guys like Bobby and Pat 10 to 15 million a year, and you can get some of these young guys and lock them up if they do start doing well, and they're probably going to be cheaper, or they're at least going to be younger, and you're going to not have to deal with some of the aging that's coming with those two. It's really valuable, and the Bucks have been lacking in that. Green's kind of the first guy who's even looked like a possible NBA player that they've used a two-way on. Sandro maybe a little bit, but he was even a pick. And same with Sam Merrill. Like those two were picks, and Sam Merrill is doing really well for the Cavs right now. But it's just good. I'm interested. Like I didn't like Lindell or Bolden being on two ways. I'm happy they made that move. It's nothing against them, but I saw no ceiling. Like I don't see anything where you're going to get a player out of those two. So I'm hoping that these two that they opened up go to two guys who at least have like something to dream on and something you can try to develop into a real NBA role player instead of somebody that I think they kept both of them in case they needed depth. And to me, it's like you got 15 people on your roster. Use these spots as developmental spots and try and get people who can actually help. So I don't know if you have any quick thoughts on the two-way thing or pretty much cover it.
no, you nailed it. It's a good kind of segue because it's if we do trade a couple of those guys, you want to kind of breed some more guys that you like and you can kind of mix in because I mean AJ Green wasn't even guaranteed a spot this year, really. I mean, we were hoping that he would get like a legit contract with us, but like it's just you can kind of always fill in and like you said, you mentioned the Heat, like that's why they keep even when they're like a 500 team like last year, they're just gonna keep finding guys. So if you can kind of turn into that while you're competing for championships, I mean, your windows is going to keep getting bigger and bigger. But I
Yeah.
think you nailed it too. I mean, those are two guys that we like. Obviously, they're not like bad basketball players or anything, but like they're not going to play for the Milwaukee Bucks like for at any point, or even get a shot really. So you might as well use it on guys who might have an opportunity really at some point in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, um, oh man, I totally lost what I was about to say. It doesn't matter. Um, but oh no, no, no. I now I remember. If some of these guys like there's an element of having a chip on your shoulder for some of these guys too, who believed that they should have been drafted, believed that they deserved real roster spots. Um, I think you see it. That's I think what the Heat do a really good job of almost ingraining in these guys is that like, hey man, you were overlooked. Like we gave you a shot and you're taking advantage of it now, and we're going to reward you for it if you do, or you're going to get rewarded by the Cavs signing Max Strus or the Lakers signing who's a point guard? What's his name? Gabe Vincent.
Gabe Vincent, I was just thinking that before you even said it, how that was literally a guy who was nothing, and they turned
Yeah.
him into something.
Yeah. And then he got rewarded for it. So if you're the Heat, now you can go to two-way potential guys and be like, hey, look at what we do with these guys. So you start hitting on some people and start showing that they can help. Now players are more interested in coming into your program too. That's why I think it has to start somewhere, and Green hopefully will be a beginning of like at least some sort of developmental plan for some of these two ways and hopefully getting something out of them. So talked more about that than I thought we were going to, but that was our little spiel on the two ways. The only other thing we've got updated All-Star voting. Giannis is still leading the entire NBA in votes received, which is still unbelievably cool to me. I just think I can't believe the Bucks have a guy that's getting the most votes in the NBA.
By a good chunk too. It's like
Yeah,
400,000 or something. It's not even, I mean, that's close still, I guess, relatively, but I mean, like,
yeah,
that's no joke. Over LeBron, like, you think LeBron would just get blind votes and he deserves
right.
it, obviously, but we have the guy who is succeeding LeBron James.
Yeah,
Like, I can't wrap my mind around that.
yeah. And frankly, I think it shows that the media is missing out when they refuse to give him his props and cover him because people want
Hmm.
to hear about Giannis and people are clearly big fans of Giannis. And we won't touch on it, but the MVP like rankings that keep coming out are just hilarious to me. Like Giannis will have huge games and other guys above him will have or below him will have a bad stretch and they'll jump him in the rankings. Like I don't understand what we're doing here, but it won't matter. I
And
don't care.
Porzingis is at like 7 for the rankings or something. Like, okay, yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
But yeah, so Giannis leading, and then we did see Dame fall from number two to number three in the guard voting for the All-Star game. So I don't know how much the listeners of our podcast can help, but if you are not voting for Dame, go out and vote for Dame. He has not ever started an All-Star game. I think it'd be cool to see him get that opportunity. Um, do I necessarily think he absolutely has earned an All-Star starting vote this year? Probably not, but he's been very good and he's our guy, and it would be cool to see him get his first opportunity to do it. So go out and vote if you haven't. It's going back to the East West, right? There's no draft.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just East
So
versus West.
get to watch Dame and Giannis together. Like who gets to watch that? Oh, we get to watch that every game. It's great. Um, but yeah, try and get him. We're hoping to see him get back up in there because it would be cool to see him get his first start. Um, yeah, that's all we got other than Gunner, give me a random buck.
Yeah, I'll keep it quick since we had so many rants. Although I
This
could
is
rant about
long.
this guy too. Corey Maggette. And I remember when we traded for him, and I always was a big Corey Maggette fan, but everyone right now, once I said that name, you can imagine what he looks like. He was just an absolute tank. He looks like he should be like a defensive end or a tight end in the NFL. Um, and he was a really good player. He averaged like 20 or whatever. And then when he came to us, he was like a six man, didn't play a lot, so we kind of were the start of his tail end of his career. But um, I I regret to say that I was sadly and happy. Like I was happy that we got him, but it was sad that I was happy that we got him because I was a telltale of the times back then. But and he was a good player, but it's just like I don't know. I
You
just
did not
in
want to be
small
there.
tangent, I was just playing like randomly NBA 2K10, and I was just like, I wonder if they have any like old like Bucks games on like YouTube that I could watch, and I just randomly started watching like I think it was like the second game of the year in 2010, like NBA tip off where maybe that was yeah 2010 2011 season, and it was like Corey Maggette against like the Celtics, and we brought it to overtime, and I was sending you clips of it how we were getting screwed by calls and stuff, and um, he got a horrible over the back call that I just can't get over. But yeah, I was a big Corey Maggette fan, and he inspired me to lift weights, even though I really didn't do it much until I got older. But I wanted to look like him because he looked incredible. So shout out to Corey Maggette.
Yep. Freak of nature. Did not want to be in Milwaukee at all, but he was here and he had to play. um, my guy is he was one of my favorites as someone who was very, very short growing up. Um, Earl Boykins. He I loved him when he wasn't on the Bucks, and when he came to the Bucks, I was so pumped because he was our short king. He was I mean you're talking when you would see him out on the court, it looked like it looked like Mike kind of like he did not fit at all. I mean, he was 5'5", 135. We're talking about one of the small, I mean, that's these days I see guys playing point guard at that height in middle school. Like
Yeah.
he was doing this in the NBA and he had a really, I mean, just a solid career. He
Yeah, he was good. Legit
Oh
good.
yeah. With Denver, he averaged 12 a game over 4 seasons. He averaged 9 a game for his career. I mean, he wasn't he wasn't much of a shooter, but he could hold his own on a wide open shot. But my favorite play from him is, and I want to say that this was, I know it was the Spurs. I want to say it was Tim Duncan who closed out on him as the shot clock ran out. He was probably 15, 20 feet away. He pump fake. Duncan jumped for some reason, which I don't know why you would need to jump. And then Boykins just shot it underhand right around him and banked it in as the shot clock was going off. And it was just like, to me, that was so indicative of how everything he did in his career was just finding a way to get around what he wasn't able to do, like what he didn't have at his advantage. And yeah, for me as a kid who was short and like I said, played basketball, but also even football at that point and stuff, like I loved seeing someone who was really, really small, able to compete and do stuff. So I always have appreciation for Earl Boykins. And whenever he gets a card in 2K My Team, I make sure I get it so that I can use him once in a while. He sucks in there because he's way too small for the game. But, no, I loved Earl Boykins. I don't know what he's doing now. I wonder what he's doing now. I might have to look into that later. Hopefully he's not doing anything bad and he's a good person. But
Oh, he would never do that. But no, he was. I'm just looking at it right now. He averaged 14 with us and 40% 3-point shooting his first go around with us, and then he averaged 15 when we traded for him with the Nuggets, which you said being that short is just incredible. I mean, how that's possible in today's NBA. That's definitely not even possible. Um, but I remember my family nicknamed him Earl the Squirrel, which I don't even know if that was his a
I think
nickname. It
people
sounds like
said
it
that.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought I just came up with that, but or my family did, but it seems like way too accurate and too good to not be true. But he was one of my favorite players on the Bucks, at least in that like whatever year that was when he first came with us, just strictly because he was short. And like you
Yep.
said, I'm 5'8", so like I felt like that was me on the court. And even I would probably look tall next to him, but uh and then I sent you an old Facebook post that I had in 2011, and I just had all caps, and I put Earl Boykins in like a smiley face. I don't know why, but yeah, that was like our original form of tweeting. But
Yeah. Well, he was
um,
back that year. That's why
yeah,
they brought
so
him
that
back.
proves that I was a Earl Boykins fan.
Yeah. Yeah. No, Corey, I feel like Earl probably enjoyed Milwaukee more than Corey did, but two good picks, I think, today. Um,
Yeah,
all right, this is going to be way too long. We gotta wrap this up. So please like and subscribe again on whatever platform you're listening on. Remember to follow us on Twitter at the Cream City Pod. Just for those of you who are actually listening to this at the end of this, we do plan to do some sort of giveaway soon. Try and get a little bit more motion on the Twitter account. Um, so keep an eye out for that. We'll put that up probably sometime within the next week. I think we're going to come up with exactly what it's going to be and what the requirements are and everything, but that'll be up soon. Once again, if you want to leave feedback for us on how we can get better or something that you liked and you'd like us to keep doing, anything along those lines, that would be great. And then, yeah, thank you all for listening, and we will see you early next week.